And now, a passage from The Movement in Oregon for the Establishment of a Pacific Coast Republic by Dorothy Hull. To fully understand the political tendencies of the West, it is necessary to understand the Western spirit, for political platforms are but a more or less clear reflection of the spirit which animates those who frame them. The West has always been the home of democracy. The Western movement in the United States, from its first inception, was a democratic movement. The fur traders who blazed the trail to the West, and the ranchers and farmers who followed in their wake, forging the broader path for civilization, were not aristocrats, but the common people, rugged, self-reliant, and ambitious. They pushed to the west, drawn by the lure of adventure, seeking cheap lands, and a chance to work out their political and social ideas free from the aristocratic organization of the East. Hence, in the West, democracy, social and political, became the dominant force. The life of the pioneer was rough. Social amenities were few, but a man's valuation was based on his personal worth and ability, and not on his wealth or ancestry. The problems confronting the pioneer were new and difficult, and through the effort required for the solution, the minds of even the older men experienced rejuvenation. With all his faults, the pioneer must be admired for his idealism and his optimism. The early isolation of the West and the completeness of its geographical separation from the political center of the nation fostered an intense feeling of local independence. It was not surprising then that in times of great public danger, when vital sectional interests were believed to be at stake, the spirit of local independence should find expression in the doctrines of popular sovereignty, states' rights nullification, and even secession. So it was that before 1795, the people of the Trans-Allegheny West threatened the establishment of an independent republic when it appeared that a selfish and short-sighted Congress was on the point of bartering away for ephemeral commercial advantages the right of a free navigation of the Mississippi River, on which the very existence of the western frontiersmen depended. So it was that during the critical period of our history from 1850 to 1865, when the forces making for the destruction of the American Union were gathering impetus for their most dangerous attack on the integrity of the national government, and when the Pacific Railroad had not yet bound the West to the East with bands of shining steel, there developed on the Pacific Coast a movement for the establishment of a Pacific Coast Republic. While it is true that the movement was supported by but a minority of the people of the Pacific Coast, the fact of its inception by political leaders of the West is significant. While the first cause of the movement may be considered the spirit of the West, its immediate occasion was the conflict of local and national interests, which became especially marked after 1855. To understand this, it is necessary to present in greater detail the federal relations of the Western states and territories. The movement in Oregon for the establishment of a Pacific Coast Republic, 1855 to 1861. On June 15, 1846, the treaty with Great Britain was signed, which secured to the United States the territory of Oregon lying south of the 49th parallel of latitude. The Oregon question was thus settled, and it was supposed that the American government would at once proceed to organize a government for the newly acquired territory. It was not, however, until August 14, 1848, that the bill providing for the organization of Oregon as a territory became law. This unexpected delay caused by the opposition of the pro-slavery leaders in Congress to the clause in the Oregon Provisional Government declaring that neither slavery nor involuntary servitude except as a punishment for crime should ever be permitted in the territory was peculiarly galling to the citizens of Oregon, who felt that although their efforts had been largely responsible for the acquisition of this valuable territory by the United States government, that government was now refusing them necessary assistance and protection. Nevertheless, all bitter feelings were forgotten in the general rejoicing at the news of the passage of the Territorial Bill in 1848. March 3, 1849, the territorial government was put into operation by a Democratic governor, General Joseph Lane, appointed by President Polk. The governor entered upon his duties with energy and enthusiasm, and the machinery of government was soon running smoothly. In Oregon at this time, the political lines of demarcation were not those laid down by the great national parties. Such parties as existed were based on purely local issues. Before the territorial organization, the people of Oregon had little reason to be interested in the national disputes of Whig and Democrat, And the Oregon settler, though perhaps a violent partisan before his immigration to the far west, after that immigration soon came to think little of his former party alignment and to concentrate his attention on local affairs. National interests, however, were not dead, but merely dormant, and the organization of Oregon as a territory led to an awakening, which, though gradual, was nonetheless complete. The position of the people in relation to the national government practically forced them to take a definite stand with regard to national politics. Unwelcome evidence of the dependence of the people of Oregon on the political complexion of the national government soon appeared. The election of 1848 placed the patronage of the government in the control of the Whig Party, and the incoming government was not slow in bestowing all available positions on office-hungry Whigs. Oregon soon felt the weight of this policy. The Democratic officials who had already won the confidence and respect of the people were replaced by Whigs. A period of bitter political strife followed this change. Politically, Oregon in 1850 was in a transition state. The Democrats were undoubtedly the strongest party numerically, but they, as well as the other parties, lacked organization. It was impossible that such an anomalous condition of affairs should continue long. It was evident that both local and national interests demanded the perfecting of party machinery, and the Democrats, spurred to additional effort because of their hatred of Whig domination, went to work to perfect a party organization for the territory. The Whigs, though at first radically opposed to party organization, learned a valuable lesson from their decisive defeat in the election of 1852, territorial, and the organization of the party followed without undue delay. But even after organization, the Whigs were not strong enough numerically to compete with the Democrats, nor were their political tactics equally as astute as those of the chief rival party. In the Democratic Party itself, leadership soon passed into the hands of a few men who came to be popularly denominated the Salem Clique. This group was in turn dominated by the commanding personality of Asahel Bush, the editor of The Statesman. The Salem Clique gave to Oregon an arrogant and narrowly partisan rule. Rebellion in the ranks was not tolerated, and erring members were ruthlessly read out of the party. These domineering Democratic leaders also soon found it difficult to submit to the superior power of the national government. Their proud necks chafed under the yoke imposed by Eastern officials appointed by an unsympathetic Congress. This feeling was particularly strong during the Whig administration of President Taylor, and loud were the complaints and many of the protests launched against the custom of filling Oregon offices with foreign appointees. The territorial delegate in Congress was requested to suggest that it would be well if the people of Oregon were granted the power of electing all their territorial officers. The suggestion, needless to say, was unheeded. In the meantime, a violent and bitter struggle was in progress in the territory between the Whig officials and the Democratic legislature. The tension between the two parties soon became almost unbearable. Two possible remedies appear to have suggested themselves to the Democratic leaders: statehood and independence. A movement for statehood was actually set on foot in 1851, and also in that year appeared the first accusation that the leaders of the Oregon democracy designed at no distant day to throw off their allegiance to the United States government and attempt to set up an independent republic. If the danger existed, as seems probable, it passed away with the success of the Democrats in the presidential election of 1852. In 1854, the most momentous measure that passed Congress from the day the senators and representatives first met until outbreak of the Civil War was introduced in that body, the Kansas-Nebraska Bill. The storm raised by the passage of the bill was never to die away until slavery itself should be crushed. As Charles Sumner said in speaking of the act, "To every man in the land, it says with clear penetrating voice, are you for freedom or are you for slavery?" Not only did the Free Soilers and many of the Whigs denounce the act, but many members of the Democratic Party refused to follow their leaders in supporting it. In a document entitled The Appeal of the Independent Democrats, the bill was stigmatized as a gross violation of a sacred pledge, the Missouri Compromise, as a criminal betrayal of precious rights, as part and parcel of an atrocious plot to exclude from a vast unoccupied region immigrants from the Old World and free laborers from our own states, and to convert it into a dreary region of despotism peopled by masters and slaves. The great Democratic Party was nearing the rocks on which it was finally to founder. The doctrine of popular sovereignty enunciated by the Kansas-Nebraska Act was one that from its very nature appealed to the people of Oregon, with their virile Western confidence in the ability of the people of a locality to manage their own affairs, and yet in the beginning, there seems to have been little unanimity of opinion with regard to the bill. Despite the dominance of the Democratic Party, there were in Oregon great numbers of thinking people who opposed the farther extension of slave territory and viewed with alarm the aggressive attitude of the Southern Democrats who were dictating the policies of the National Democratic Party. In 1855, the first convention of Free Soilers was held in Oregon, and the movement inaugurated, which led to the formation of the Republican Party of Oregon. There appeared, too, a visible defection in the Democratic ranks, though this was due to local rather than to national disputes. It was during these troublous times that the rumor of a plan to establish a Pacific Republic, a plan inaugurated by some of the Democratic leaders, again became persistent. In July 1855, an editorial headed "Our Future" appeared in the Standard Democratic, suggesting the idea of the formation of an independent nation west of the Rockies as being in harmony with the designs of an all-wise providence by whom this natural boundary had been laid down. The leader ran in brief, "In a new country, there are no old associations, no stereotyped habits which filter in an accustomed routine our actions and our thoughts, but the customs which we were wont to have in our homes have given way to those which are formed by our new associations. Yes, it is indeed too true that we must look for new and energetic governments in recently settled countries. The British colonies of North America passed through a revolution and reared for themselves the proudest republic on the face of the earth. The French nation alike overturned the dynasty of Louis Philippe and established a republic also. With these facts before us, the future of our country demands attention. What will be the results of these causes? Can it be possible that within a few years the Pacific Coast will ask and can secure an independent government? Would it be policy for them to do so? And if it would, what will be the effect of our petition to the United States Congress? Is the recently avowed doctrine of territorial sovereignty broad enough so that it will permit us freely to say whether we will come into the Union or whether we will remain without and become separate from it? If nature ever marked out the division of countries, it has done so in North America. The vast chain of the Rocky Mountains presents an unmistakable boundary, and we have reason to believe that these boundaries laid down by an overruling providence ought to be more strictly regarded. Should we secure anything to our advantage by coming into the Union, which we could not have by and of ourselves, let us think before we act. The growing disparity of habits between us and the Atlantic states and the pecuniary advantages or disadvantages of a separation from the states are not the only questions which ought to be considered. Is it policy for us to join a government, the different sections of which are even now antipodal on a most exciting question, and which are cultivating a spirit of disunion by their altercations? Do we wish to embroil ourselves in the agitation of a question which might be totally foreign to us? This agitation may cease, and in the name of heaven, we hope it may. But present aspects are most cheerless. Looking at this question coolly and dispassionately, that is, the policy of uniting ourselves to a government already shaken by civil feuds and sectional dissensions, and which we should enter into by an entrance into the Union, and which we could avoid by refusing to bind ourselves by any closer ties, we are compelled to ask seriously what is our duty in this respect to the present and future of Oregon. These questions may be deemed visionary by Fogyism. So was that of the separation of the United States even after Lexington, Concord, and Bunker Hill had been wet with crimson dew, yes, and until after the Continental Congress had assembled at Philadelphia. Carefully laying the burden on the shoulders of an overruling providence, Oregon's Democratic leaders, with these facile arguments, tentatively broached the subject of the Pacific Coast Republic. The leaders of opposing political complexion were not slow to take up the challenge. The Oregonian Whig was particularly bitter in its denunciation of these revolutionary ideas. An editorial headed "Revolutionary Filibustering in a New Direction" ran as follows. 4 years ago, we repeatedly told the people of Oregon that the leaders of the self-styled Democratic Party designed at no distant day to throw off their allegiance to the United States government. We were led to this belief then from certain unmistakable evidences apparent in every act of those who then controlled and now govern the Democratic Party of Oregon. The recklessness of their conduct, the utter disregard of law, order, or precedent, was then a subject of alarm, and has continued to increase to this hour. Whatever may be said of those who are constantly prating about their love of country, their devotion to the interests of the American Republic, the facts are upon record that these men have been constantly laying their plans for a revolutionary movement, as the sequel will show. Although the party in power in this territory have had everything in their hands for the last 3 years, and although the leaders have been able, under their hypocritical cry of democracy, to create, deceive, and gull the majority to sustain their measures, and to elevate an unprincipled set of demagogues to office and power, although their pension newspapers and party hacks have denounced for years the great fundamental principles of Americanism, yet we are not prepared to see them at this early hour throw off the mask and declare in favor of a revolution and a separate government here, but nevertheless they have done so. It will be remembered that upon 2 occasions this same party have endeavored to fasten a state government upon the people. These same men have always been the warmest advocates of a state government. The people have as often pronounced against their favorite measure. Now, in view of a strong probability, reduced almost to a certainty of a radical change in the administration of the general government, these men and their party come out in favor of a separation from the United States and the formation of a new government. Men, and particularly unprincipled men, never act without a motive. These filibusterers have a motive in view which will not fail to present itself to the mind. Their object is apparent: the time, place, and occasion which has called forth this first published evidence of disaffection will not fail to convince the honest mind of every American in the land. Here you see a party which proclaims loud and long that Americans shall not rule America, proposing a disruption. They are endeavoring to create disaffection, anarchy, confusion, and discord among the people, urging to a rebellion, a revolution against their country. What for? The object is plain to those who know and can appreciate the character and aims of the party calling itself the Democratic Party. Are the people of Oregon prepared for this movement on the party chessboard? They will, of course, endorse it and push on the cause of disunion. We know not a few who will not take passage, no matter who may attempt to lash or goad them into this infamous measure.